And they invaded the Philippines, which is 9,000 islands, over 9,000 islands. They invaded the Philippines, and over a period of 100 years, they completely conquered the islands. They apparently killed about a little more than half of the people. Okay, killed more than half. You know, so 100 years later, the population didn't grow. It was less than half of what it was when the first Spaniard landed. Okay, and during that time, they had their conversion to Christianity, their style of Christianity, and they forbade all expressions of traditional culture, medicine, and martial arts, and so on. Completely forbade it. It was a Class 1 felony. So, for example, for 480 years, if you were a Filipino, if you did a traditional healing art, which this work, what we're doing in the Philippines is called Hilot, H-I-L-O-T, the traditional hands-on healing of the Philippines. If you were caught doing it, or if someone ratted you out, because there were bounties, for 400 years there were bounties on healers. If you were ratted out, you could go to prison, be tortured, or put to death. Yeah. How about that? So prison, torture, or put to death, or all the above, and not necessarily in that order. Sometimes it'd be put you to death and then torture you. You know, they were very creative in the way that they tried to contain this. This went for traditional dancing. This went for traditional music. In other words, you had to learn how to play Spanish music. You can play traditional music on traditional instruments. Okay, because it's not Spanish, and so you're not Filipino anymore. You're Spanish. Okay. Well, funny thing, the Filipinos went, okay, you got the swords, you got the guns, you got the cannons. You're going to shoot me if I don't nod my head. So yeah, I'm going to what you said. Yeah, okay. I'm Spanish. I'm not Filipino. I don't know any healing. I don't know anything. Okay. And then for 400 years, when the moon was full, and in the remote areas, little groups about this size would find their way to a farm, which there have been little breadcrumbs left, like just a little piece of fabric tied to a tree here, or a piece of fruit cut in half, but maybe not exactly in half a certain way, or just a chunk missing out, turned a certain way, and they would find their way to that farm, and under the moonlight, they would practice. Now, they'd only have about a day, maybe two, because there were rules against travel. You weren't free to travel. You couldn't go far from your village without permission, written permission from whatever was the local authority. That alone could get you thrown in jail or tortured, just traveling without permission. Okay? Everything that they were practicing was illegal for 480 years. Everything illegal, because it was their traditional culture. They would practice music like this, they practiced their healing arts, and they practiced their martial arts like this for 480 years under the Spanish. Okay. So they only have a day or so. So here I am, I'm a teacher, right? And you just snuck out of your village, traveled through the bushes so no one would catch you on the road away from your village, over however far you went to get to me, and we just had the full moon because we're not going to use light, because if we have a group of people and bright lights, well, that's going to attract attention. The neighbors will turn us in because there's bounties. Okay? And it's poor country, so people want to make money, right? So we get together under the moonlight and we practice for just a day or two. Not so long that anybody's really going to miss anybody. Not so long to reduce the chances that someone by accident is just going to show up and surprise us or discover us. And they practice like this for 400 years. And over that 400 years, they developed a concept of how to impart a lot of information very, very fast that a person can take with them, go back to their home, go back to their village, and they can practice it and open it up like a flower blooming. Or as you get a little bit in the class with the teacher, you go home and you practice, and as you practice on your own, the practice blooms. Until, guess what? Even you can now set up a little center, and you can start teaching, and so on. Taught in secret like that for 480 years. My teacher, Leo T. Gahi Jr., was the first generation of Filipinos that could practice out in the open legally. First generation, okay? And that was after the Second World War, 1950s. First time they could actually practice in public without having to have a permit and a license, and nobody has to worry about going to jail because they're doing what we're doing. And so what they worked out was this concept called flow. That's where it comes from. It comes from Leo Tigahi, comes from Dionisio Canetti, comes from Floro Villabrea. First person who taught it to me was Danny Inosanto. He said, I can teach you a flow, a sequence of movements that you do. Don't try to do it right. I'll show you the right way to do it, but don't try to do it right. Just get the flow down and then go home and practice repetitively. Do it 1,000,000 times. And what will happen is the flow will teach you how to do it. The flow will teach you how to do it. All right? I came from a school in Thailand where the average student was in the school for 4 to 7 years. I'm teaching in America where the average student can't tolerate me for a weekend.
That's not true.
I'm just saying, how am I going to get those two together? Because no, I tried to, when I first started teaching, I tried to do it the way I was taught. I did. You move into my house and you live with me for 4 years, and we'll practice all day and we'll practice all night, and we'll you know, after a couple of weeks or whatever, most people would just go, you know, it's like, time out. I can't take it. I can't do it. People can't make those kinds of commitments. Certainly can't make it because you don't even know what it is. Right? And so I developed the level system. I invented it. There was no such thing. I invented it. And I came up with this idea from my Filipino teachers, see, that the best way to teach the most information in the shortest time was to do it the same way that the Juramantados in the Philippines had practiced their Hilot arts for 400 years, which was you get together for a short time, you learn the flows, the vinyasa, and actually in Filipino, in Tagalog Filipino, the word for flow is, for the sequence is vinyasa, just like it is in Sanskrit. And that's because before the Spanish, what was the culture of Philippines like? It was a Hindu culture. It was part of the Majapahit Empire of India. It was the southernmost outpost of the great Indian culture of the Magadha kingdom, called the Majapahit Empire. Okay, so a lot of the words are the same. Chakra in Filipino is chakra, you know? Okay, so that's what I did, and that's how we get to where we're at. Okay, I know you've been to lots of other classes. They're technique focused. They give you a technique, and you just practice, and until you get it down, and you go on to the next technique. And then if you're lucky, toward the end of whatever they're doing, you get to put some together. You know, put it together, or they might even just give you a chart. Do these things in this situation, right? You have to put it together. How you get from one technique to the other is not important. It's not important. You know, you could take a cigarette break from one to the next. It wouldn't be a big issue, as long as you do things in the right sequence. Okay, so our flow is like that. It really is a fine science of how to give you a lot of information in a really short period of time, that by the time you leave this class, you'll have the flow and the sequencing of that you can practice at home. The gift box of the benefits of that flow will come later. They won't come here. They come later, and only if you practice. It's another sad part. See, this art requires practice. You don't practice, you don't get the bennies. You won't get the treasure, because it's only as a result of practice. And I say 300 is the magic number for each flow. Once you get about 300 in, something just clicks in your head. Mm-hmm. It's amazing. I mean, those of you who've done this and been practicing for a little bit, don't you see that there was a point where just one day it's like something is just different about your practice? Okay?
You actually can start listening.
Having done this so many times, see, we can even predict when that will happen based on how much you actually practice. How about that? 30 is the first hallmark. Some of the flows we're doing here, you may get 30 repetitions in before we're done. Kudos to you. See, that's if you don't start and stop. You'll get more if you flow. You'll get less if you don't, right? But you'll see there will be a big shift once you just knock it out 30 times. You get close to it, you'll find all of a sudden, like it seemed like yesterday I was struggling, and all of a sudden today it's like I'm a different person doing this. And it'll seem like a miracle to you, but it's a miracle I told you was going to happen. You know, told you, like, Mother Mary's going to be on the mountain at 4 o'clock tomorrow. That was a miracle, but it's going to be at 4 o'clock tomorrow. No, really, it's going to happen. You know, you go up to the mountain, you see Mary, and you think I'm special. Okay? It's the same way with this.